Okay, third time lucky. This is the third time I've had to film this video. Hopefully I won't have to do it again. All right, so today I want to talk to you about another fragrance from the line from House of James, which is an Australian perfumer. I want to talk to you about the bottle that I actually won in the competition that sort of introduced me to this house. So the fragrance is called Sun King. Just getting it out of its packaging. This is the bottle here. And I was a little bit nervous about picking this particular one. So the way the competition worked was you enter the competition, you win the bottle, but then you get to choose which fragrance you wanted to have. And of course, not being familiar with the house, I really just didn't have any idea as to which fragrance I wanted. So I just had to go off basically the notes of the fragrance. And I chose this one even though I had reservations about it, because this has agar wood in it, and agar wood, I believe, is a form of oud. But oud I am familiar with in several different forms and having various levels of success in terms of whether or not I like it. But I decided to go for this one anyway because it sounded interesting. It is one of these most popular fragrances in the line. It's the perfumer's personal favourite, and I thought, well, at least if I don't resonate with it, Matt might like it and might like to wear it. So I chose this one. And this one, much like Berlin New Year's Eve, surprised me quite a bit. So it opens with lots of mandarin. Effectively. There's bergamot in the top as well, so there's lots of citrus in the opening. But the citrus isn't sweet, and it also has a bit more depth to it than citrus that I'm familiar with in fragrances normally would have. And in fact, the mandarin note in here, in the opening, is very bitter, and it smells just like my fingers would smell after peeling a mandarin. So it's really got that mandarin oil element to it, and it feels, it's got the bitterness of the pith, and it's very, very interesting. It really does smell almost photorealistic in terms of a mandarin in the very, very opening. So it's sort of fresh. Well, it is fresh. It's a refreshing opening. Lots of citrus, but it also has a texture to it, and it really does conjure up images of citrus peel and the feel of it in your hands as well, and in addition to the smell. And then also in the opening and bringing you into the mid dry down is I think it's a green tea note, but it's a tea note, which gives it a clarity, I think. So it counterbalances that oiliness and the pithiness of that mandarin note in the opening, which is at the same time bright but also moderately dark. It has some substance to it, and so the tea note brings a bit of clarity to that, I think. It starts to get sweeter in the mid dry down, and the really sharp, punchy bitterness of that mandarin note in the opening starts to level off a little bit. So then the citruses even start to smell sweeter as it comes into the mid, and the tea note just keeps it fresh and light and clarified is the word I think I'm looking for. So it really sort of is in quite a stark contrast to the oiliness of that mandarin, but at the same time it works very well, and it's very well blended. So you're not getting like a clashing, oiliness. Hello, Poppy. You're not getting a clashing sensation with the substance of the mandarin oil in the opening and the tea note. They just blend together really nicely, and it's just a really nice, slow, progression that's very gentle, that brings you into the mid. And then as the fragrance develops more on your skin, there is the agar wood that starts to make itself known. And it's interesting because this isn't a really super woody fragrance or anything, and the oud is not, the agar wood doesn't have, a skankiness to it like other oud fragrances can have. But that agar wood, I feel, does impart kind of a, I don't know, it's like a veil of darkness through the fragrance. So the fragrance is actually primarily citrus. It sort of, and that citrus remains the whole way through the fragrance. And so consequently it's called Sun King. It's meant to be a bright fragrance, but it's also a very punchy fragrance. And it's hard to explain, but the agar wood, and I'm assuming it's the agar wood that does this. Maybe it's not, maybe there's something else in here. Maybe it's the other woods, because there's a floral woods note in there as well. And you do get some floral elements in here, but I feel like it might be the black agar wood that actually brings a bit of darkness to this fragrance, but it's not a dense, it doesn't bring density with it. This fragrance remains very light and sort of airy and juicy, citrusy, juicy in a way all the way through, but that agar wood just gives it a bit of darkness. And yeah, the best way I can describe it is it's a veil of darkness. It's not heavy, it's not opaque, but it's translucent. And it's very, very interesting. And then, as I said, there is a floral woods note in here, and you definitely get some florals. They're very nondescript, but you just get the sensation of a little bit of floral. And again, I don't really get a lot of the woods in here. I wouldn't describe this as a woody fragrance, but obviously those woods give it a little bit more substance. So it's an interesting fragrance. It develops in a very interesting way. And it's even more interesting to me in particular because this fragrance conjured up a scent memory for me, which I would never have thought of in a million years based on the description of this fragrance. And also it's a weird one because the scent memory, and I'm going to describe it to you in a moment, but the scent memory is, the fragrance doesn't smell exactly like what the scent memory is, but it definitely, there's a link there somewhere. For some reason this reminds me of that, and I'm still trying to work out what elements of this fragrance actually bring that memory forward for me. So the scent memory that this fragrance brings to me is, and it took me a while to figure this out, but for me this fragrance leans quite masculine, and it brings up a memory of my father actually when I was younger, coming in maybe sort of around lunchtime on a Saturday or Sunday after having worked on the car in the morning, and his hands would have, engine oil and grease and stuff on them, and he would wash his hands with a particular soap, and I think the soap had like a citrusy floral fragrance to it, which is probably why this fragrance is bringing that up for me. And I just remember the smell of his hands when he'd come in after he'd washed his hands, and you could smell both the cleaning product and you still had remnants of the engine oil smell. So that was all those smells were kind of mingled in together. And that's what this fragrance reminds me of. And I don't want to discourage people or to put a bad connotation onto this fragrance, because it wasn't a bad smell, and this fragrance doesn't smell exactly like that. It doesn't smell like engine oil, but there's elements in this fragrance that remind me of that. And it took me a little while to figure out what it was, but I'm pretty sure it's the citrus and the woody floral notes in it that maybe have a similarity to the soap that he used. So in any case, that is my scent memory for this fragrance, and I actually quite enjoy this fragrance, but I don't think I would wear it necessarily. I think this is one that I enjoy smelling because it brings up that image of my father from when I was young. And my father's still very much alive, don't get me wrong, but I live a very long way away from my parents, so I can't see them because of COVID. It is kind of making me feel a little bit homesick to smell this, because I feel like I want to go home and be with my parents. But at the same time, it's very comforting to me. So I really appreciate it for that, even though I'm probably myself not likely to wear it. But I can see myself really enjoying smelling this on somebody else, particularly a man. And generally, I just feel that this is a really, really unique fragrance. I've never smelled anything else like this in a perfume before, and I think it's worth trying, because I think different people get different things from this. But for me, when I put this on my skin, the agar wood does seem to amp up a little bit more than the citrus in that mid-range, and so I just find that it's not something that I personally want to wear. However, on matte skin, I believe the citrus notes were a lot more prominent, and the agar wood sort of was a bit more balanced on his skin for some reason. So again, I can appreciate this and on somebody else, but it's just not something that I think I would personally wear, but happy to keep it just for the scent memory, because that is very comforting to me. Anyway, so that is Sun King by House of James. Again, a very unique fragrance. In fact, all of his fragrances are really different. Haven't really smelled anything like them before, so definitely worth checking out. They're not going to be for everybody, but they're not intended to be. Thank you very much, James, for this bottle and the opportunity to smell your fragrances. And if I hadn't have won this competition, I wouldn't have been aware of the House of James, and I wouldn't have bought the Discovery Kit, which I did do, and I discovered 2 other fragrances that I really enjoyed. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this. Let me know if you have tried the House of James or this fragrance in particular. I'd be really keen to hear what you think. And yeah, see you next time. Bye.